our live cast here where we're going to do a weekly roll up of Q&A in my From My Desk newsletter. So I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. I've got a locals community, and then of course we're here on Restream. But I want to make sure folks can see this real quick here before we get started. I'm going to answer a number of questions that folks have sent in over there's actually four of them that folks have sent in over the week or the last couple of weeks. And so as soon as we can verify that I've got a live session here, which there I am. I'm there live. Okay. So I'm Justin Hitt with From My Desk newsletter. I'm a business development consultant and risk management professional. And we're going to answer some of the questions folks have today. Now, I've taken today as kind of a recording day. I've recorded a number of podcasts this morning. And so some of the things that I might reference may not be readily available, but typically on the podcast or via the website, you're going to find these things. The core website is www.jwhco.org. And that's going to get you to where you need to be. But what we're going to talk about here is the theme is really about productivity. How do we accomplish more with fewer resources and less time? I got to make sure I'm grammatically correct, or somebody will be confused. But essentially, as a subject matter expert, as a business owner or executive, how do we leverage the tools that we have to maximize our time, to maximize our energy, to develop better outcomes and results that are consistent with those things that we desire? So, for example, I write books, I do courses, I have coaching clients, I do consulting with folks. I might have a 3 to 18 month contract to solve specific problems for a client. Now, typically, nobody hires anybody just to hang around. So if I'm hired for a 3 month contract, there's going to be a specific statement of work. If I'm hired as an employee, or you're hiring an employee, you're typically going to have a job description. So the folks on staff that support what I do, they have job descriptions. They have specific roles and functions. In project management, we have what's called a RACI chart. The RACI chart is going to lay out roles and responsibility and who's accountable and who's communicating ideas or status. There's structure. Unfortunately, the typical person, when they sit down in front of a computer, they do not have a plan. They do not have a specific role or specific idea. They may be looking at the monitor rather than looking at the camera where they're supposed to be looking, because when they sit down, there sometimes is an overwhelming display of things. So a little bit earlier, I tried to go into my locals and do a chat, but I didn't have a local client to send the right data set over. So I ended up jumping over to Restream. I have to have a process for doing this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to consistently deliver. And if you're looking for the weekly Q&A wrap-ups and you're not seeing this, it's because I haven't been able to deliver them, not because I don't want to provide these things, but ultimately because there's other stuff going on and I can be easily distracted. So if you want to start getting more done as a subject matter expert, as a professional, as somebody who is more than an individual contributor, it's going to be very important to start building up backlogs. Now, I know you're saying you're already overwhelmed. You already got so many things going on. Backlog isn't going to make it any better. Having more to do isn't necessarily better, but I'm going to argue something different. In order to have a backlog, you're going to have a queue of similar types of activities. Those similar types of activities have a common approach. It's almost called like batching, for example. Today, I've been talking for several hours. I have a camera over here where I've done some podcasts. I have done some recordings on the desktop direct to camera here. Right now, I'm doing a live stream. After this, the rest of the day can just simply be whatever the heck I want, but this is out of the way. Now, if I'm recording 2 or 3 hours of content, which is typically delivered in 15 to 20-minute segments, I have just done a week's worth of content at one time, and I only had the single frustration of trying to figure out which live stream I'm going to be able to do one time. So the backlog itself is like work that is queued up and has a common application applied to it. So, for example, if I'm recording podcasts, if let's say twice a week, I'm recording the answers to questions people have. So, in this case, I was asked by someone who creates intellectual property to promote their professional services business. I translate their question into what is going to serve the largest audience of my folks who tune in at www.justinhit.com, or they're on one of my newsletters. I translate it into what's best for the group. And now I'm answering their question because we're not having a dialogue. It's not a consultation. They haven't committed to coaching. They haven't committed to hiring me one-on-one. So I'm going to give them the framework, which is going to help them be more productive. And so if they're doing a podcast, if they're a content creator, if they use digital assets like video and audio and social media to promote their business, then the backlog of content would be the raw recordings of their presentations. Now, we can even go back a little bit further. It might be a backlog of outlines that represent future content. If we go back even further, it could be key ideas and concepts that support or reinforce the value of them being hired as a consultant, being hired as a CPA, being hired as a professional in the legal field or professional in the technical services field. So do you see what we're doing here? We're building up these backlogs of work that has common application or common treatment. And now, let's say you have a backlog of outlines. Now, emotionally, you could be a little frustrated that you've got all this backlog of work, it's not getting done, but that's good. That pressure, if we want to be more productive, now allows us to write a process to address that. So let me give you one of those processes. Because again, it's so easy just to record things on video and slam it on the internet, but it doesn't mean it's going to generate the leads that you need to promote a professional service. So let's look at the outlines. You have a subject matter expertise. If you were to write an outline about all of the subject matter expertise, you were going to replace yourself and basically document everything you know and deliver that to a marketplace, and you made a giant list of everything you know. It's a big list. There's no way you're going to write podcasts about all of this and still have a day job or still serve your customers. And so we have to now ask the question within this list, what is the audience going to be most interested in? What is the audience going to be most interested in? And then what is the audience going to value receiving from me versus someone else? And how does that information help them solve specific problems? So this big list, this body of knowledge, this body of experience and work, you're a business owner, you're an executive, you've been running business for 15 years, and you want to now branch out to expand that business. And people need to understand that the core of your business is these three things, and that you've got a franchise model that means this, this, and this. These are benefits. And now you've put those together in an outline. You're going to have more of a sales letter outline or a intellectual property outline. Now, what do I mean by that? Maybe you write a book about the 15 things you need to know starting a franchise, and because that's what you help people do is start franchises. And then that book is the repeatable activity that people can use to quote pick your brain about common questions they have. And now that's your focus. So you go from everything to a few things, to things that your audience is interested in, to things that help solve problems for your audience, to things that cause your audience to raise their hand and do business with you over anybody else. And so these cues along the way allow you to park the work that's pending while you focus on the work that's important. The next factor from this is, of these cues, what work can someone else do? So let's skip ahead. You've recorded a podcast. I recorded a podcast over here on a camera. And now that, while we're here on a different computer, okay, because each device has a purpose. Each place I sit to do work has a purpose. I've cultivated the environment to get specific outcomes. Now I've got this queue, so I've recorded materials, it syncs out to the cloud, and now somebody else can take it from the cloud and edit it, transcribe it, can prepare it for sharing with that specific audience. Can cut out all the goofy stuff I do when I look at the wrong camera. Maybe when I'm looking at this camera because I'm checking the monitor. Maybe they are going to put a slide over top of that so it looks a little bit more professional. Maybe they're going to put a lower third down here. Maybe they're going to put the website on. Maybe they're not going to do anything other than just clean the material up and publish it online. But because it was queued up and because each queue has process assigned to it, each queue has checklists, for example, now they can go off and just do that work. Now, most of the time, what you can do is simply queue up the work and then hire somebody to go do the work for you while you're off doing something else. But because the queue exists, we're asking about prioritization. We're asking about permanence. We're asking about quality and characteristics of the outcome or the output. And we're packaging that work up. Now, there's something that I've been saying lately to folks because a lot of folks have been contacting me and say, "Hey, just tell me how to do it, and I'm going to do it because I'm going to save money." And I actually have an argument that if it's not worth hiring someone else to do, it's not worth you doing. Because again, when we hire someone else to do work, let's say we have a queue, a backlog of videos, and we're going to hire somebody, it's going to be $2,500. We are forced to ask the question, am I going to get at least $2,500 in value back? And so again, the question is how do I accomplish more? How do I get more of these digital assets done so that I can get them out in the marketplace and generate leads? And when I see that activity, we've got just the audio and the video, but we've also got landing pages. We've also got what are you going to talk about? We also have who do you want to reach? And so again, by as we figure these things out, if we produce cues, because who we reach, there's a queue, right? So people are going to raise their hand. They're going to say, I'm interested in your professional services. They might join a free newsletter. That's a place to queue up, folks. And then those who are in the free newsletter, we apply to that the opportunity for them to hire you for a paid consultation, to schedule a discovery call, to do the other things that are necessary to move forward. Now, if I was sitting in front of this person who's asking the question and we were doing a consultation, at this point they would be infinitely overwhelmed because everybody's been telling them just to record. If you record it, they will come. If you buy the right equipment, if you get the right cameras, if you get the right live stream thing, you could just simply go online and answer people's questions and they would be so delighted that they would hire you. That's not the case. That's not the case. So what you're seeing right now is a fraction of what happens, but what happens is over time been queued, um, backlogged, cataloged, coded, tracked, products developed in addition to the consulting assignments. Okay. So a lot of times you do this on your own, it's a mess. But again, you have to start with the cues. The cues are going to be that repeatable work. And then you're going to apply process to the repeatable work. And then at some point, you're going to ask yourself, should I be doing this or should somebody else be doing this? What's the best, greatest value of my time? And then this moves to the next question. Now, if there's a chat on here and you are chatting and asking questions, I may not see those things. So what I'm going to do is pause. And the reason I'm pausing is because that way the editor can cut that section out and turn it into a podcast. And I'm going to move to the next question. So the next question is, how do we accomplish more within the pressures of other time constraints? And how do we accomplish more that is meaningful for the outcomes that we desire? Did a podcast this morning, and I was very vulnerable in explaining that I found another case of identity theft. My data, I got another warning that my data has been compromised. I got another thing that I had to go in and lock down my credit score uh, because, again, there is a massive amount of fraud going on and a lot of data breaches. And remind myself to look at the right camera. Okay, so how did I know this stuff was going on? And how was I able to protect myself in this particular situation? And it was because of daily and weekly routines. So you may queue stuff up because it's work that's regularly done and somebody else is going to do it. And then if you understand that concept, now we can think about what is the most important work for you to be doing. And then what are the 3 to 5 things that you've got to do each day in order to accomplish the specific outcomes that you desire. So we have a program called outcome management. The gist of the program is that we're not doing work for the sake of doing work. I don't record these podcasts just because I love to hear myself talk. In fact, they're very disappointing at times because we don't have hundreds of people on the line. A lot of times I do a live call. I'm doing it at my convenience. I'm not doing it at a regular time every week. And so ultimately, immediate gratification or the immediate distribution of the materials is very low. However, one of the success factors for subject matter experts or consultants or people who are in high performance careers is to have the hiring manager know that you can deliver value, that you can educate a team or you can train a group, or that you understand key ideas and concepts that are necessary for the job. I can do that better with a video or a demonstration or a train or delivering a training or speaking to a trade association or group than I can do it by meeting with them one on one and going through that. And so part of my daily activity is to identify the problems clients have and then provide them a high level proposal or solution that if they use a few ideas from the call or a few ideas from the Q&A, or they know that there's a place that they can turn to get answers, that they're going to be better off than they were just searching the internet. Because again, there's an unlimited supply. We talked about this in another podcast. There's an unlimited supply of free information of which we don't know if it's accurate. So, because again, if you're coming from a place of not knowing, then anything seems like it's useful, but it's not necessarily. So, what are the daily routines? Now, the identity theft part, I caught that because part of my daily routines is bookkeeping. It's measuring free net cash flow. It's looking at stats and performance. It's understanding that if I get a phone call from somebody who's verifying a purchase, that I have to hold back certain information, even if I'm asked for it, because they may not be who they say they are. And so, what are your daily routines? Now, if you're a selling professional, your daily routines are prospecting, presenting, and closing. Prospecting might be finding people in a marketplace who has a need or a desire for what it is that you have to offer, qualifying them to determine they have the money to actually hire you or to hire your company or to buy your product or service. And then developing, again, we can use the lesson from the queuing, but developing a way of following up so that when the people are ready to buy, they can buy, providing value and education so that they can make better buying decisions, and then ultimately setting appointments and putting people in calls. Now, you might be saying, Justin, I can't do that every day. Every day, if I did that every day, I would only get like 2 hours for each item. I wouldn't be able to do other things that need to be done, like my timesheet or my expense reports or my email, checking my email. And what I'm saying is that some of those things are more important than others. And while you can't do them every day, you have to feed that system because I described a process there: prospect, present, close. That's a process, three-step process. And so if you're not feeding that process, which could be the daily activity, feed the process, then you are missing out. So what we got to do here is we've got to look at these daily and weekly activities as milestones towards a particular deliverable or a particular outcome. And so, in the case of a selling professional, the deliverable is a solution for a client who pays. Ideally, they pay, stay, and refer, but a solution for a client who pays. It isn't making the phone calls, it isn't knocking on doors. Now, your sales manager will say it is because the sales manager is measured on how many doors you knocked on. And then that causes a psychological bias of, well, I've knocked on 100 doors, but I haven't gotten any prospects. I haven't gotten any appointments. And again, if the outcome is this deliverable of solving a problem, now we narrow our focus on individuals who want to solve that problem. And then as we move backwards, we're now prospecting with people who are pre qualified. Rather than quantity, we now have quality. And so, again, what are these milestones? What are these steps? And a lot of times, folks, we just write them on paper. We just get a notebook of, I don't have one sitting around or close to me, but standard operating procedure. Hey, what are the three ways that you're going to prospect today? And are there some of these ways that you should do every day, and some of them you should just do it once a week? And then again, we're a lot of my clients use media. They create intellectual property. They write books and reports. They might have a blog. They might have a podcast. Again, our audience, if we see it from their perspective, if we see it from the buyer's perspective, they have a problem they want to solve. They're searching for answers. And if they can see that you're consistently helping them deliver answers. Now, again, these calls are not about training. I give you a general model that you can get started with, because the specifics are very often much more complex than what we can describe in a Q&A session. But again, what are the 3 to 5 things that you need to do each day to get results? Now, Dan Kennedy is someone who I highly admire. I've gotten a lot of his books and materials. In the direct marketing world, the 3 to 5 things are kind of the same as the sales world. So you can borrow. So if you're a copywriter, you need to get in front of new prospects because you're presumably writing assignments for existing clients. You need to do that in a way that can be done without your direct interaction. And so, like, a live seminar may not be the thing, because I've got to physically actually be here at the live seminar for, I think it says, one viewer. But again, that one viewer is extremely important, because when I recycle the program later, I know that it's going to have more viewers. The point I'm making here is that if you're a copywriter, you might use letters, an email, you build an email newsletter, you might go out on social media, you might go do specific ads. And so, of those things, we are going to have a list, and then you can decide which of these things are most important to do. Which of these things do I have to do? Remember, the theme is productivity. Which of these things can I automate? Which of these things can I stop doing because they're not producing results? And this, again, is an exercise that can be done on paper. You don't need a fancy app on your phone. In fact, getting a good night's sleep is very powerful. If you can get 8 hours of sleep every night uninterrupted, and you can get good nutrition every day, then you will be more productive by default, because your body will be functioning better. And I see people going and saying, "What app do you recommend to help me sleep better?" The app on your phone, a lot of these phones, I don't even have my phone sitting here, but a lot of these phones are distraction machines, addiction machines. There are unlimited supplies of things that are taking you away from the work that you're supposed to be doing. I don't think having a phone is facilitating quality sleep as much as maybe a comfortable pillow, a quiet environment, a dark room, a better mattress. Now, what I am finding out, by the way, because we do have a report we put together for another channel of mine that talks about how to get better sleep, a soft, comfortable mattress isn't necessarily helping you get better sleep. And in some cases, a harder mattress will help you get better sleep. But if you got to pick up an app on your phone and push the buttons before you can go to sleep, then you're not going to get as quality rest as these other elements. So by writing down these regular and daily activities tied to milestones. And again, a couple milestones come together to produce a deliverable or to produce a specific outcome. That structure is going to help you get better results. That structure is going to deliver the long-term outcomes that we're looking for. So again, the question is like, what I got to do each day to get results. I can't tell you, unless we sit down and go over the specific outcomes you want to create. And then we're going to just take those outcomes and we're going to break them down into milestones. So your monthly earnings could be a milestone. And a salesperson might say, if they need $20,000 a month and my typical sale is $2,000 in commission, then I need X number of sales each month. Of those sales, I need to, and we're digesting those materials. And so what I've been able to give you here today is that you start with the end in mind. I know Stephen Covey, he was right all those years ago. You could have just read that book and implemented and got to where I am today. But again, there's so many distractions. It's not your fault. I understand. There are so many distractions out there. I can't even look at the right screen because every time I move my hands, I look over here at the monitor. Again, results come from performance. They don't come from contemplation. So do that exercise. That'll get you going. I'm going to pause here for a minute. Again, the one person watching might be my mother. is not going to be, I may not be able to see your chat, but I'm taking a pause here again so that my team can edit it and we can turn these things into podcasts later. I want to demonstrate that I'm doing the things that I'm teaching my clients, and I'm doing the things that I have gone through the exercise and work. Doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but it will create results if you do the thinking. Now, like I said earlier, so I found out that someone had purchased a timeshare, a high five-figure timeshare with Hilton in South Carolina, which I've not been to South Carolina in quite a long time. But in April 2023, somebody's bought a timeshare in my name. Now, they didn't send me any information so that I can go enjoy it, because this is likely some kind of fraud. And so I found out about this recently. By the way, it is now August of 2024, because they were doing some compliance work to see whether or not I bought this timeshare under duress. And it turns out I didn't buy the timeshare. And so I was able to notify them. And so, how do we protect our interests? I'm busy doing stuff. Maybe they sent a letter before. Maybe they called me before. I don't know. But the underlying fact is identity theft is more rampant than ever before. Now, this is not a pitch for some product that's going to help you monitor your credit score, or help you monitor your data out there with data brokers, because I'm not sure that these tools aren't doing something different. I'm not sure that these things that people are offering to help with identity theft aren't actually gathering information and packaging it up to sell on the dark web. I don't know. It turns out that a lot of the VPN services that are available were actually selling your data when they said they wouldn't. A lot of these VPN services that operate out of other countries don't have the privacy requirements that we have here. So I did an extended podcast on the issues I faced with identity theft and some of the things that you can do. So this question I'm just going to answer with some bullet points, and then hopefully we'll put a link in the description below, so that you can get that actual podcast after the folks edit it and put it up online. But again, it's close to my heart, because I've just found out a couple days ago that I purchased the podcast. I purchased a timeshare that I didn't purchase, and the headaches that come with this. So first off, if you find out that you've been and I don't want to say victim, because there's a lot of this stuff that happens that you don't even know about. People selling your data, credit cards, all that stuff. Could have got skimmed, credit card skimmed at a gas station. The first thing is we want to make sure that our publicly facing data is manageable. So when I get gas at a gas station, I'm using a specific credit card that's for outside transactions, that does not have a large credit balance. Okay. Sometimes you can use a prepaid card for this, but I like to use a card that has a strong um, fraud protection, and that they're going to cover all that fraud if something happens, because I'm only using this card at gas stations, if I'm dining out, if I'm traveling. It's my publicly facing card. Now, I have other cards or bank accounts that are only used for specific transactions. And so my forward facing transaction, it's okay if it has a $1,500 limit, and then I can't use ATMs or something like that. But my other card, which might be my bank card to use ATMs, or the card I have to give them when I go in the bank, that is only used for specific transactions, and it's managed differently. So, for example, if I'm buying things on the internet, that's a different card than if I'm getting regular subscription services. Now, it doesn't always work out this way, but ideally, you want your credit statements to have a common pattern, so that when you review I know this is something not a lot of you guys do, but when you review your credit card statement, or you review your bank transactions, or you're doing your bookkeeping, you have an idea that something's unusual. Now, this also builds up patterns on those specific cards, and they will warn you about unusual activity. So, for example, oh God, it was probably 5 years ago, somebody had stolen my information, opened a credit card up, and then was traveling across the northern part of the United States on this new credit card, and they had overran the balance on the card, and I get a phone call. Now, again, I'm paranoid about privacy. I'm constantly changing my passwords, and I have ways of making sure I'm doing that about every 90 days. I don't give my information out. all this stuff, and then I still get identity theft from time to time, but I'm able to detect it quickly. And this is because the government's been hacked, and AT&T gets hacked, and all this data gets hacked. So we're in a world where you have to be vigilant about these things. And so the first thing is to how to protect your interests is to keep them close to you. So your goals, your business ventures, the structure you use to manage your company, all that stuff has to be closely held. Now, that doesn't mean you do everything, but it just means that if you're going to have a company, you're going to have a different person doing the bookkeeping than who's writing the checks. You probably should go through and approve the checks before they're written. You're going to have regular bank statements and stuff. And by the way, I'm being real careful not to duplicate the things that we talked about earlier, because when they put the link in the description, you will want to listen to that podcast where we cover more consumer based elements about protecting your identity. And again, I don't believe that these services are doing what they say they're doing. I pulled my LexisNexis consumer report. So you may not know about that, but LexisNexis is a massive data broker, and they have metadata about other brokers who are using your information. And so when I pulled my record, it's like 70 some pages. I was able to find other people's, so my address, my phone number, other people's names, my name, different address, different phone numbers, and that alone, it takes time to address. And I'd rather have a lawyer address that, or me address it specifically, than to go to some unknown service that some podcaster was promoting and sign up for their service. So example, LifeLock, for example. Where's LifeLock today? What happened to LifeLock? Now, I'm not saying that they are good or bad. I'm just saying that there's an unlimited supply of companies who promise to protect your data when it's really your responsibility, when really you could do simple things like bookkeeping, getting your copies of your credit scores, maintaining structure within how you handle bank accounts and transactions. And then when, of course, if you incorporate into a business, you now have some legal liability protection. And then within that business, they could be a holding company that manages your homes. It could be a holding company that manages your business or real estate investments. It could be a company that is structured as a trust or as a charitable trust in order to give you tax breaks. How you structure it is not as important as actually structuring it, because identity theft is rampant. In fact, me with my limited knowledge can go on the dark web and buy lists of credit cards and information. I didn't, by the way, I don't do this, but in the capacity of working for a Fortune 100 bank, I documented the process in which this is being done, because there was a 10-day breach of their bank account information, including transactions, on the dark web. And the security compliance people didn't know. But I'm in risk management. Part of my job is to discover these things, or when I hear about these things, to help them create the controls. So I was on the compliance side, um, operational risk management. And so I went out there and I documented the process and the controls. And then somebody in the company went and bought the data. And they went and bought the data, and they looked through the data, and they're like, holy crap, there's probably an insider threat here. And so again, it's not if somebody steals your identity, it's when. But if you've compartmentalized the activities you're working on, you've built out structure and oversight, you've got good accounting records, you've got a process for addressing this. And the process personally is to always flag all your credit reports, notify all these companies that the transactions could be under duress. That is going to cause issues on your side. I don't know if duress is the word, but um, basically, when you freeze your credit reporting, they'll note it on the account, and then if any high transaction comes through, it'll usually get denied. And so if you're getting ready to buy a house and you freeze your credit, you'll get notified that you're trying to buy a house, and then you can okay it. And it's an inconvenience, but it is going to give you a little bit of protection, because evidently somebody bought a high five-figure timeshare in South Carolina, which you're probably, from a money laundering perspective, going to flip it into just turn around and resell it. Um, they were able to do that with my name, my address, and my phone number. Now, I haven't seen anything show up with my credit score, but ultimately, the spelling of the name is slightly different. So Long story short, man, this is happening. By the way, I'm working on a book called anti-money. Well, the inside title is anti-money laundering techniques, and it actually includes how to launder money, and then the expected controls that an organization would have. So, if you're running a bank, a regional bank, or a larger bank, if you're in the risk management world and you're interested in anti-money laundering, this particular book does require a verification of who you are. And so you'll have to get me a business card, or you're going to have to show me your profile on a verified profile on LinkedIn or something like that. But long story short, the I'm drawing from a body of knowledge of how people rip people off, because that's what I did in the banking world. And so nothing I've construed here is encouraging you to rip anybody off or to steal somebody's identity. It's just to be aware that if you're an affluent business owner or executive, that you're a target. I would just leave it at that. All right, let's get to the last question. Because again, man, it sounds like I'm just giving people more work to do. It sounds like every time we turn around, we've got to do more stuff on the computer. We got to do more work, but really you want results. So this next question is about that overwhelm. This next question is about how do we do less and accomplish more? Now, this isn't about being lazy by any means. Very often, high drive individuals. So, I was talking with an individual who's into weightlifting and they also own a business. And that same drive to just get those reps done is driving the growth of his business. And he shows up every day ready to perform. And there is a life balance that's there. But the typical client of mine is driven and they're going to get it done whether they hire me or they don't. The difference is that my insight, my knowledge, my experience over time can help them shorten the time in which results come. But the typical mentality is doubling the amount of work to shorten the time. But my argument is that if you double the amount of work, sometimes it can take twice as long, 10 times as long. Now, let's talk about health. If we double the work in a way that impacts our health and impacts our abilities, you end up with you know uh, uh, respiratory issues because you're sitting at the computer all the time and you're constantly hunched over doing the computer stuff rather than having movement in the environment. Maybe you have a stand-up desk. Maybe you're walking back and forth to a conference room in order to do your meetings rather than sitting for 8 to 10 hours a day. You're going to be able to accomplish more than someone who has got health issues and loss of energy and focus. So a lot of folks say, "Well, Justin, why do you talk about the health? Why do you talk about the physiology of things?" Well, that's because it impacts your mental state. So the mental state that this person's asking about is they say they have zero focus. They want to accomplish certain things, but there doesn't seem to be enough time in the day. And so, how can they do less and accomplish more? Now, we've talked about looking at those activities and determining, can you delegate anything? There's certain things that you're doing every day that you can do less of. We talked about if you can um, think about that process in which that work exists and how that process can be automated, can be streamlined, can be improved. We do a lot of business process optimization at individual levels because if you're an executive, it's you incorporated. Most executives, most business owners, there's a concept of function around their needs and desires. That's in the relationship realms. That's the you relationship realm. And within that, what's your daily routine? When you get up in the morning, what do you do? And does it facilitate the outcomes that you desire? Now, they asked specifically how to do less and accomplish more. And I heard this from a mentor a while ago, and it feeds into if it's not worth hiring somebody else to do, it's not worth you doing. But they look at their life as they're the leader, they're the facilitator, they're the catalyst that gets things done. They don't have to do it themselves. They don't have to do it at all if they don't want to. Now, if you're an employee, it's a little bit harder to have this mindset because a lot of times you are the one that's been hired to do the work and someone else up the food chain has expectations of you to be an individual contributor. Now, that's the worst place to be in because once they've commoditized the thing that you do, see a lot of the subject matter experts in the audience, They have specialized expertise, and the more you learn about that, the more you feel like that you're the only one, when in reality you're not. Even when I was working with complex Unix systems as a systems administrator, there were 25 people in my region who did the exact same work as I did, and we were interchangeable. So I'm asking you to set aside the ego and understand what is it that you really do, what is it that you bring to the table, and then start taking the things that are literal commodities. Like, for example, if you're mowing your grass, if you have grass at all, you are wasting time on a commodity that a kid down the street could not only be doing, but gain valuable work experience, gain valuable insights on ethic and how to interact with people that you don't need. You don't need those skills right now. You can get those skills in other ways. And so hire a landscaping service, hire the kid down the street, get less grass by changing your landscaping, um, figure out how to do less and get at least what everybody expects. So if you're in a neighborhood, your neighbors have certain expectations about what your yard should look like. And then, of course, the if you have a homeowners association, if you have a city council that gets into everything and tries to boss people around, um, not that I have any experience in that, you have to make the decision: am I going to stay here and conform, or am I going to move into an environment where I don't have to conform? So that's why many executives, Elon Musk used to sleep on other people's couches, and then eventually got apartments near where he worked, where the Tesla factory was, or where SpaceX was, and that way he could actually do less, have a smaller home. I'm going through like a heavy downsizing because I want a little bit more flexibility in travel, and so I'm downsizing everything. Now, I did also have a problem with the city who didn't like my landscaping. And so ultimately, even though I have mowed my grass maybe 5 times in the 2012, yeah, in the like 10 years of living here, me personally have probably mowed the grass 5 or 10 times. Most of the time, I have a landscaper that does everything. So the grass is probably not the issue. But the underlying fact is, I don't have to put up with that shit. I just go move someplace else. And so again, if you are going to, you have no focus, get focused by choosing fewer things to do, of which those fewer things are higher value, better leverage, better outcomes. And a lot of folks say, well, I don't have the money to just hire people to do stuff. If you don't have the money to hire people to do stuff, you don't have the money to do it yourself, because there's an opportunity cost associated with you out there sweating your ass off in the yard. In fact, I had heart issues. And the first time I passed out in the yard, it felt like somebody was taking a spear and shoving it through my chest. I was having, there wasn't a heart attack, but it hurt. And I was out of breath. I couldn't get up and down the steps. And I'm out there mowing my damn grass. I went down the street to the teenager who's mowed the grass before and said, look, I'm going to need you to mow the grass full time. Let me know what I need to pay. It's yours. It's your deal. And then he ended up mowing the grass and turning compost and doing the things while I recovered that I didn't need to be doing in the first place, because my hourly rate was multiples of his hourly rate. And so we get into something what we call the every hour rate, is you take all the compensation you earn and divide it by all the hours in the year. And if you can hire somebody to do a specific set of work and they're going to have 60 to 80% the same quality that you would have, then you go ahead and just hire them. So we're not going to do the math in my head, but if your every hour rate is $12 an hour, then anytime you can hire somebody for $12 an hour or less to do work that would free up your time, then you just hire them to do it. And they'll get it done. And if they have a quality of 60% or better, then it's going to be better than you doing it, because again, your earnings are multiple of their earnings. But it's not just about that. A lot of times business owners and executives and subject matter experts and professionals in the marketplace are working 70, 80 hours a week because companies are not staffing the way they're supposed to. And companies have these extraordinary demands on individuals. And so if you are even just saving an hour of time that you can invest in your family, I will tell you from personal experience that a divorce is very expensive and it's going to change your lifestyle. But so is a heart attack. And so is getting COVID. and so is getting having a immunity issue because your body, you haven't been getting proper sleep and you haven't been caring for your health and nutrition. Uh, Listen, folks, I say this many times: the world is more complex than we see it being. But if we can zero in our focus onto the things that matter, so we do a heart to heart with our family and say, look, is it important to you that we live in this giant house? Or could we live in a different place and have more outdoor space? Or, could we be in a small house in a better school district? Could we could we send you to a private school in a rural area that has a high rating and good educational outcomes versus trying to live in a city and do that? Could we, rather than commute, could we work remote? And so really, we start with what do we want to accomplish? And now, in the beginning, I worked 2 shifts, 7 days a week for 10 years and ended up having a TIA stroke. And I'm just, I'm older now. I want younger people to learn from my mistakes, but at the time the mentality is just do more work. Do more work. Do more work. Work more hours. Get more phone calls in. It wasn't delegation. It wasn't meaningful work. It wasn't leveraging relationships. It wasn't building syndication or automation. It wasn't stacking a function. It wasn't curating our days. It was just do whatever showed up. Any customer is a good customer. Real quick, I found out that there are profitable customers. So let's say you can't afford to hire people right now to do critical things that are necessary for your business or for your activities. And so now just get better clients that pay more. I know. I know. I make it sound simple, but again, I got 15 minutes to fill in a podcast. And if we went into all the details and the emotional struggles and everything like here, I would have to speak so generic it wouldn't help anybody. And that's why we have the coaching and the consulting, so we can speak one-on-one and talk about your unique situation. So I've had clients that are busting their ass for 10 years, making $441,000 a year as a company, when really they should be making that as a family, because of their. Now, by the way, they lived in a travel trailer, or not travel. They lived in a single wide trailer, and you had to drive through an affluent neighborhood to get to the single wide. And ultimately, oh, hello, Manus. Thank you for chiming in there. Ultimately, they lived on $400 a month, and they're running this company at $441,000 a year. But he's been doing this for 10 years. He's got diabetes now. His health is suffering. His kids are about ready to go to college. We sat down and within 6 months got that company from $441,000 a year to $1.3 million money received in the bank. They had a backlog of about $7 million. See, the backlog conversation we had earlier really matters, because if you can build a backlog of clients who are ready to do business with you over anybody else, that reinforces increasing the rates. But if you're hiring people to do the paperwork, hiring people to do the chores, to clean the house, and then you're also thinking about structure. Okay, well, we have to hire the house that I'm in right now, 3,200 square feet. It takes two or three cleaning folks 2 hours to clean this house. Now, I could just not clean it, and that'll be fine. I could just get a smaller house, or I could hire people cheaper, or I could go minimalist. A decision I made is, why don't I just get rid of the house and get a smaller house, because I don't need all this space, because divorces are expensive. And now, now that that's behind me, I don't need as much space. Turns out I'm happy with a small amount of space because I live in hotel rooms. I used to travel a lot, and so I would live in hotel rooms or efficiency suites. And I really liked the fact that I could tidy up in like 10 minutes. And I thought about it. I said, well, you know what? The best place I've ever lived was a 1,300 square foot townhouse, because I could get up in the morning and before I was downstairs for breakfast, have cleaned the majority of the house. And so again, are we doing things because of social conditioning? Are we doing things because we don't have the right answers? Are we doing things because we feel emotionally compelled to do them? Or are we doing things because they're producing the outcomes that we desire? They are moving forward goals and objectives. And so I'm going to challenge you to do less. If you're working 80 hours a week, how could you work 40 hours? Now you can drop it by 10%, and like we talked about in the 1% implementation program. You can say, okay, I'm working 80 hours a week now. I'm going to drop it down to 70 hours and see what that does. How is that different? I'm sleeping 6 hours a night. What if I slept 8 hours a night? And I want you to start doing experiments in your own life. I also want you to clarify what it is that you want as far as outcomes are concerned. I have a booklet. It's actually a book that's available. It's like a workbook at www.jwhco.org called "What Do I Want and How Do I Get It." Um, I don't actually remember if that's what it's called, but somebody will put a link in the description below because the book is simply about how do we do the mental work necessary to figure out what we actually want from life. Okay, so I just pulled it up over here. The book is called What Do You Want and How You Get It. And it's specifically, again, we only have 24 hours in the day. Now we have an unlimited supply of other people's time, but we'll have to exchange money for that. And money is just the medium of exchange. You might have to do partnerships or bartering or whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter. If we're going to leverage someone's time out of respect, we're going to deliver them value. Out of respect for those who are watching this program, I want to make sure I'm giving you specific nuggets of value that you can implement and gain monetarily from so that you can afford to pay attention. A lot of folks today can't afford to pay attention and they jump from website to website and YouTube video to YouTube video and they chase all this stuff when really they have within them the ability to sit down and say, what do I want? What do I want from life? And what's necessary to get that? And what's the steps along the way? And where should I be focusing my time? And then in the case of like hiring the kid down the street to mow the grass, that kid is doing incredible today. I I don't give myself any attribution of value to that. But when he comes to me and says, "Hey, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this." Now, again, he had the opportunity with 50 other people because he was a hustler. He got out there and did things. But again, he wasn't hurting his education by mowing grass on the weekend, choosing to mow people's grass rather than watch video games. And then this has happened over the years is that people have come to me and said, "Hey, I was a client of yours 10 years ago, and here's an update about what's going on." That is value to me. That is why I would bother to record a podcast and deal with all the headaches of recording these videos. Again, this is a Q&A session that we have. If you have any questions, put them in the chat below or visit us at www.jwhco.com. And this is my From the Desk program where I literally take stuff off my desk and address it for the audience. If this format is good for you, let me know because again, like you said, after it's out there, we're going to promote it. We're going to get a bunch of visitors and it's on I think it's on YouTube and LinkedIn right now. We'll probably use the recordings and turn them into podcasts. Oh, folks, that's called stacking a function. And so to wrap up this call about overall productivity, Um, I'm demonstrating you stacking a function. So I'm recording it once, going to use it many times. I'm demonstrating you cultivating and building relationships because those who ask these 4 questions, I will email each of those people and say, "Oh, by the way, here's where you get the answers." Um, we're using syndication, which is other people's platforms who already have access to an audience in order to reach those audiences. Um, I'm building the content based on formulas. So I'm not just coming up here and chatting with you. I'm talking about the problems first. What is it like having these problems? What are some possible solutions? What is the solution I'm recommending? And then I varied that up because there will be people who watch the whole program. And then finally, I'm using tools to simplify activity. So I'm not trying to record it on the cell phone and then, you know, edit it and then publish it. I'm actually publishing it live. I'm all these fumblings that I'm doing is how it's not a big deal because it can get edited out later for the secondary audience. But those who bothered to show up, now that I know, and by the way, thank you for chatting in there. Um, and I might get your name wrong, but Manis, thank you for saying hello. because now I know chat works. And so a lot of these calls, we can do a back and forth Q&A at the end. In fact, Manis or anybody else who's watching this on the live session, go ahead and put your questions in here. I can stay another probably 15 or 20 minutes to answer your specific questions, because we're at the 54-minute mark, and I like to keep these under 90 minutes. But I also have another chat up for other people who are watching on another channel, but I can now start weaving these questions together. So the format for the from my desk is I'm going to answer 3 or 4 questions, and then we'll weave them together with your specific questions. So if you have anything about productivity, and then ultimately I'll invite you to join a newsletter or something like that, because we do have the locals channel coming together. So we will answer any questions. I see a question that just came up on the chat I've got over here. Okay, so you want to know more about the backlog, the concept of backlogs, and how does that fit with doing less and getting more? Okay, that's a good one. Okay, so the premise of what I said is that we're going to start building up backlogs, and then we're going to apply processes to those backlogs in order for someone else to do the work or for us to do the work more efficiently. Well, there will be a period of time that the backlog is overwhelming because you're going to see all this other work that's not being done. But because you're prioritizing that work, and so this is pretty common in task management systems and to-do lists. You're going to end up with always going to end up with more to-dos than you can possibly actually implement on and do. And so if you're going to do less, we have to go for quality over quantity. And so you need a place where that thing can queue up. So for example, and I'm not sure how to share my screen, but there's a queue in my note-taking system of all the tasks that need to be done, all the work that has to be completed, and it's actually tied to individual projects. So when I go through project management, I can say what's floated, what's the cream, what's floated to the top of my to-do list, and I can go work on those things. Now, if there are areas where you're constantly getting behind, those are good candidates for queues. And those queues could be as simple as you're going to do a monthly newsletter to connect with people who've showed interest in your product or service. And so you could write 12 articles all at once. You could write 2 articles a week, because again, the 12 articles in a queue stacks the function of knowing what you're going to write about every month, rather than coming up at the end of the month and not having a piece of content available. Do you see how that works? So the queue is a place to put things that are pending. And we know they're pending because we're working on the most important thing that must be done now. So a queue could be a list of tasks. It could be a general ledger. It could be a ticket system. Actually, a ticket system is a real good way of starting. And so when I was doing IT services, every problem that came in, they got a ticket number so they could track where they are in the queue. Now, the enhanced value that I deliver in this particular piece here is assigning a process to the queue. So for example, bookkeeping. I just looked over here because the mail comes in, we open up all the mail, we put the bills in one pile, we put the checks in a different pile, and we put the white mail in another pile. That's a queuing system. Now I can take the stack of bills and they can be entered into the system. I can take the checks, deposit them at the bank. I can take the white mail and reply, because I offer that you can ask questions. So people write me with questions, of which I don't feel comfortable holding up the letter, because sometimes they're a letterhead, and sometimes they're pretty long-winded, which is okay. We deal with that. But again, now I'm single tasking each item. So I'm doing less by focusing on one item at a time, but I'm applying a general process to each of those items. Now, when I ran my first company, Open Systems Networking Inc., which was a Delaware C corporation, and it was way too much overhead for an IT consulting. I actually had binders that would have all the tasks in them. So if I hired a new person, I could show them the binder, and they could go to processing mail, and it would open up and they would say, we're going to take this pile of mail and we're going to put it into 3 specific piles. And one pile is going to be the bills that need to get paid. One pile is going to be the checks that we receive. And one pile is the actual white mail, things that we ask questions for. Now, I had a problem with somebody embezzling, and so we ended up having all the checks mailed to a different box. And if I had higher volume, it would have been a box that just simply they open it and deposit everything. They open it, scan it, deposit it. I ended up having a PO box where all the payments went to. Otherwise, the clients would pay by credit card. So that's an example of optimization to get around the problem that you could have people you delegate to that don't do a very good job. Again, by having the PO box picked up by a bookkeeper who I trust to handle these things, um, or I was picking them up and I would open the bills and I would just go deposit the bills and I'd open up the checks in front of a copier and I would take sometimes they'd have an invoice or a remittance in it and I'd take the check and put it on the copier, fax it, photocopy it, take the checks and deposit them immediately. Because again, you want to put the money in the bank as quick as possible. So these checks are in my bank account before they're registered in the bookkeeping system. But now I have a stack of photocopies that I can hand to the bookkeeper so that they can just enter them in the system. And so we would go from maybe 72 hours before a check got deposited to 24 hours before a check got deposited using a queuing system with a specific process attached, but understand the process may change over time. So again, don't look at the work to be done, look at the work you should be doing. And then if you're doing the most important work, something that's in the queue that's not that important can wander away. It can just not get done. You could hire a second person to start looking at the queue with you. You could stack function with automation with additional people to manage the queue. IT services, for example, you just hire more technicians. And if you're not able to hire people, then should you be doing the work at all? And so it's kind of, I don't know. It's a conditioned mindset. A lot of times when I start working with somebody as a client, we might have to come back and review those processes because they've got this. And I did the same thing. I had this big elaborate process to do something when it was just open the envelope, look at what's in there, identify what's in there, and put it in a pile. So we want bite-sized chunks. The reason my staff are having problems doing that is because I had a massive chart and I had decision trees and it was just overkill. So again, a lot of times when we're doing too much, we're actually getting in our own way and we're pushing out the more productive activities that we would rather do. All right, I haven't seen any more questions. Thanks for the okay on that. I appreciate that kind of addressed what you need. If you want to work, if anybody wants to work specifically with me to talk about their unique situation, because I do understand that when you're inside the business, it feels like it's unique. When you're inside facing the problem, it feels like it's unique. But from my expert observations and through doing a SWOT analysis or doing some kind of analytical measure of activity or outcomes, you got the same problems that everybody's had over the years. I've got more than 30 years of experience doing this kind of stuff. And ultimately, it's been this. There's a reason I can build these notebooks and write reports about these activities is because I've been taking notes and it's the same problems over and over, just different people. And so, what I'm able to do now is identify your problem. So, build a problem statement, identify the problem, what's contributing to the problem, determine a root cause, develop a list of corrective actions, and then ultimately implement. If you spend 90% of your time implementing what you know you can do well and you delegate everything else, you are going to be way ahead of the game. So actually, 4 hours of talking is about my limit. Thank you for being a part of what we're doing here today. This wraps up the From My Desk question and answer session. We're going to try to do one of these every week. And that means I'm going to need your questions. And so you're going to expect later some comments below that are going to have links to specific episodes that are complementary to what we have here. And again, I try not to repeat myself because I'm only going to get to do so many words a day. But again, I'd love to hear from you. I'm Justin Hitt from Inside Strategic Relations, from the From My Desk newsletter. We have a locals community. We have coaching programs. We have courses. We have books and reports that'll help you shortcut. Because one of the fastest ways to do less and get more is to use other people's experience. But ultimately, I specialize in business development and risk management for high ticket sales. It's going to be companies with $5 million or more. But everybody, of course, is welcome on this call because the magic of technology lets me leverage. If you want more information on what I've talked about here, you want to visit www.insidestrategicrelations.com. We're going to learn about how to be more influential in your marketplace, how to be more productive, how to reach peak performance, and then our general catalog of reports and books and stuff like that. Very affordable stuff because, again, I wrote this stuff once and you can buy it many times. That's at www.jwhco.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.